achieving justice for other animals, and to building a just and sustainable world where all are free. I dedicated my life to fighting for individuals, including the millions of marine animals whose bodies lie in this market today. But like most of you, I'm sure, my journey here was not straightforward. For 14 years, I worked in the field of international development, working with various international NGOs and institutions to alleviate poverty and food security in the global south. From 2009, working with organizations like the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the World Fish Center, I focused heavily on how farming fishes would alleviate poverty. My PhD analyzed how fish farming could help rural people in Ghana in West Africa. And then I went on to do further work in rural communities in countries like Sierra Leone and Bangladesh, all looking at fish farming. During that time, I went vegetarian. But even so, I continued my work on using fish farming to address poverty. And I rationalized to myself that while I have the privilege to stop eating other animals, but the people I was trying to help don't have that privilege. But at the same time, I felt increasingly uncomfortable. As soon as I finished my PhD, I went vegan, and it became increasingly difficult to do my work, knowing that it wasn't aligned with my vegan ethics. In 2017, I was working on a project in Sierra Leone, trying to introduce fish farming to rural communities to alleviate poverty, to reduce food insecurity for rural farmers, to diversify people's diets and increase their income. In my heart, I was increasingly unconvinced that this would alleviate poverty. But not only that, I found myself sitting in a 5-star hotel, talking with my colleagues about helping some of the poorest people on the planet. And I realized the world I was in was not aligned with my values. I realized this industry I was working in, which in a deeply colonial way strove to spread animal farming and fishing in the name of development, and which remained uncritical of humanity's exploitation of other animals, was no longer a world that I could fit into. And that day I decided that I couldn't do this work anymore. I took 6 months off to figure out what I wanted to do, and I started reading about animal justice, and I learned about how animal oppression is entangled with the struggles of our planet and of humankind. I learned about how these oppressions enable and compound each other. And I learned that we cannot simply focus on single issues, because ultimately we cannot have human liberation without animal liberation, and nor can we liberate other animals without taking into consideration humans and their struggles. And we cannot end the climate crisis without dismantling the unjust hierarchies that allow oppression to arise in the first place. We must center those victims at the margins. And that is why we are here today, in the dead of night, outside this market, because it is our duty to center the marine animals who are so often forgotten in our struggles for climate justice and liberation for all. It is so easy to focus on the cute individuals and mammals who seem so much more like us. It is easy to forget marine animals when we are far from their habitats, when we cannot hear their screams, when we cannot understand their facial expressions. Yet, it is much harder to forget fishes when we realize that between 1 to 3 trillion of them are killed by humans every year for food. It is much harder to forget fishes when we acknowledge the mounting scientific evidence that they are sentient beings with rich inner lives. that they form relationships with those around them, and that they have a desire to live and be free, just like us. In our struggles for climate justice, we often focus on the fossil fuel industry and, to a lesser extent, on land-based animal agriculture, while seldomly talking about the fishing industry. Yet this industry is responsible for 70% of plastic pollution in our oceans. It is responsible for massively declining fish populations and the rapid destabilization of ocean ecosystems. It is incredibly resource-intensive, exploiting over 55% of the world's oceans, and a staggering 25% of marine animals are caught, including turtles, dolphins, whales, and sharks. These animals are hauled up with the catch accidentally and then discarded as waste. 70% of fisheries are considered overfished by the United Nations, but we need to acknowledge that when we are talking about individuals who want to live, any amount of fishing is overfishing. This facility where we are sitting and standing, Billingsgate, is central to this destructive industry. It is the UK's largest non-coastal fish market, and we estimate that it trades in the bodies of over 40 billion individual animals each year. One day we will arrive at a world when our oceans will teem with life forevermore, and all will be cradled by a safe and stable planet. One day our society will work in unity with the communities who inhabit our oceans, and all will be free. I believe with my whole heart that this world is possible, and I invite you to create it with me. Thank you.